Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. We're coming to you live Riverside from Kyoto, Japan. We really didn't make it back to our live camera location yesterday. We had quite a journey. We'll show it to you throughout the hour. Shortly, of course, we'll be interviewing the president right here in Japan, who's here for the G20. But back in our native land, the United States of America, the Democratic Party went completely insane yesterday. That's been happening for a while, of course. Insanity is a process. But last night, at the first Democratic primary debate of the 2020 season, they made it official. Elite Democrats have permanently broken with reality. They no longer care about what's true, what's possible, even what's real. They live in a kind of dream state, a place of fantasy punctuated by howls of self-righteousness. Watch as Julian Castro, and keep in mind, he was an actual cabinet secretary in the Obama administration. That was only a couple of years ago. Watch as Julian Castro explains that men who get pregnant have a moral right to taxpayer-funded abortions. Not joking. Watch this.
I don't believe only in reproductive freedom. I believe in reproductive justice. And, what that means is that just because a woman, or let's also not forget someone in the trans community, a trans female, is poor, doesn't mean they shouldn't have the right to exercise that right to choose.
And so they cheered. Behold late empire liberalism in full flower. Who exactly is the constituency for Castro's idea? Men dressed as women who get pregnant. That's the constituency. Unfortunately, there are precisely 0 people on planet Earth who fit that description. Not a single person, actually. There never have been any people like that. There never will be any people like that. Why? Because it's impossible. Biological men cannot get pregnant. Pretending otherwise is lunacy. It's the very definition of lunacy. But Julian Castro doesn't care. Taxpayer-funded transgender abortion sounds like something that all good progressives should support. So Castro fervently does. And critically, he knows that nobody in the room will defend science or pause to ask him, what the hell are you talking about? They can't say a word. They're too intimidated. They know HR is watching. So they nod like monkeys, as if everything he's saying is completely sane. Oh, good point, Mr. Secretary. Trans females shouldn't have to pay for their own abortions. That's racist. The whole thing was like a cartoon or an Evelyn Waugh novel. It went on like this all night. Here, for example, is Julian Castro agreeing with Elizabeth Warren that it shouldn't be illegal for foreigners to break our laws. Watch.
When somebody comes across the border, not to criminalize desperation, to treat that as a civil violation.
Criminalized desperation. And you thought this was your country just because, like your ancestors, you were born here, just because you pay half your income to the government to keep the whole thing going, you thought it was your country. Think again, racist. America belongs to the rest of the world. Your job is to shut up and pay for it. Complain and we'll punish you. Bill de Blasio often makes that point. Now, de Blasio, the single worst mayor in the 400-year history of New York City, that's impressive. But how did he wind up on a presidential debate stage last night? God knows. Maybe he illegally immigrated there. Doesn't matter. He was there. And once he had the mic, de Blasio promised to seize your money and give it to his supporters, who he explained deserve it much more than you do.
Yes, we're supposed to be for a 70% tax rate on the wealthy. You hear folks say there's not enough money. What I say to them every single time is there's plenty of money in this world. There's plenty of money in this country. It's just in the wrong hands.
Got it? We've got the power. Soon we'll have all the guns, and we're coming for your stuff. That was the major theme of last night. And in case anyone missed it, the 2 whitest candidates on stage decided to repeat the point in stilted Spanish.
Cada votante necesitamos la representación y cada voz necesitamos escuchar. Este presidente ha atacado, ha demonizado los inmigrantes. Es inaceptable y voy a cambiar esto.
Got that, gringo? You can add the English language to the long and growing list of things the Democratic Party considers racist. How long before you're banned from speaking it? Think we're joking? Right. Better to learn Espanol if you want to talk to your grandkids. It's a brand new world. Some of the least impressive people in America are making the rules. Hope you're excited for it. At least men will be able to get free abortions. Even when they weren't speaking Spanish, when Democrats argued it was typically an effort to one-up one another on immigration. Who could be most radical? Watch this.
I want to make sure you're treated with respect.
I'm still talking about everybody else.
But you're looking at just one small part of this. I'm talking about a comprehensive rewrite of our immigration laws.
That's not true.
And if we do that, I don't think it's asking too much for people to follow our laws when they come to this country.
I'm talking about millions of folks. A lot of folks that are coming are not seeking asylum.
Wound up. Fox's Ed Henry was in Miami last night for the debate, and he joins us this evening. We're always glad to have him. Good to see you, Ed. How was it?
Tucker, good to see you. Amazing. Round two coming up. You laid it out pretty interestingly. One of the juiciest parts of this story, though, is that not too long ago, Julian Castro himself said the border crisis was BS. That's what he told CNN. Now he's trying to break out of the pack by beating up on the president, so he's saying just the opposite. It's such a crisis, he said, we need to do something radical. The word you used a moment ago, so radical that Democrat Amy Klobuchar said, time out. She said she'll look at decriminalizing illegal crossings, but said, wait, the real focus should be on going after human traffickers who are hurting women and children and people who are, quote unquote, violating the law, which, remember, the president has said not for weeks, but he's been saying for years. Funny, because other big Democrats on stage tonight for part two have also flipped. Kamala Harris said dealing with illegal immigration was a, quote, distraction from the real issues. Bernie Sanders said there was no crisis. Not a good look when apprehensions at the border are up 623% from 2017. Then there's Bill de Blasio, you mentioned a moment ago, pushing that 70% tax rate for the rich. He and Elizabeth Warren went further. They raised their hands in favor of ending private health insurance altogether for millions of people. Democrat John Delaney, who was on the stage last night, told me after he thinks that's political suicide for his party. One of the many reasons why the real winner from these two debates, second one starting soon, may be the President of the United States. Tucker?
Ed Henry, thank you. It'd be interesting to know what labor unions think, who's spent 100 years negotiating private health insurance, what they're going to say about that. Well, NBC brought 5 separate moderators to last night's debate, almost all of them pure toadies to the Democratic Party. And together they spent, not surprisingly, most of the night tossing softball questions to the candidates, or questions intended to drag out the Russian collusion hysteria. Here's a selection.
We saw that image today that broke our hearts, and they had names. If you were president today, hoy, what would you specifically do?
Do you have a plan to deal with Mitch McConnell? If the House chooses not to impeach, as president, would you do anything to address the potential crimes that were outlined in Mr. Mueller's report?
No U.S. president has ever been prosecuted for crimes after leaving office. Do you believe that President Trump could or should be the first?
Is Trump bad? He's bad. Lots of softballs. And yet still, no matter how easy the questions, most people seem to agree that former Congressman Beto O'Rourke beclowned himself. After the debate, one obviously smitten MSNBC anchor fussed that he wasn't being taken seriously. Beto, watch.
I do still think it's interesting that there is just a snark to the way you're treated, whether it's by the media or by the other Democrats on stage. And I wonder what that's what it looked like to me as someone rooting for you're rooting for everybody. I think a big field helps all of us. It's certainly more fun to cover. But you were singled out, you were targeted, you were attacked, and I wonder what that was like.
So you're a blushing fangirl. Okay, should you admit that in public on live TV? Probably not. But no matter how impressed she was by Beto O'Rourke, he's still more impressed by himself. Watch this.
But what grade would you give yourself for last night?
I'd give myself an A.